In a world where memories are programmed, one woman chose to remember what the system erased. For 6 years, she brought bread to a man who had no name, until the day he walked into her wedding and changed everything. Year 2186. A location: Zone 9, New San Diego, United Earth Coalition. As dawn broke across the domes of Sky Grid, the city shimmered with pulses of code, neural signals bouncing between orbiting satellites and Earth's central AI nexus. Citizens moved with augmented eyes, guided by neuromaps. Memories were streamed, filtered, and filed by rank. The streets breathed in harmony with the system. But not this alley. Beneath a broken surveillance drone and a bench erased from the city's navigation grid, a woman arrived, always at 4:31. Her name was Elia, 97, a citizen-class baker. While the rest of the district used auto kitchens, she kneaded dough by hand, infused with yeast that held mnemonic strains. Croissants and cinnamon rolls shaped not by code, but by memory. Yet that wasn't what made her different. Each morning, she wrapped a croissant in biopaper, poured synth coffee into a thermal flask, and stepped out the back door. There, in the same spot every day, sat a silver-haired man. No DNA record, no neural ID, no presence on the memory net. To the city, he didn't exist. But Elia saw him. Every morning, for 6 years, she placed the food beside him, with a handwritten note. "May your day be peaceful." He never spoke, just nodded. That was enough. Her coworkers whispered, "She's feeding a ghost." Could be a purged consciousness, dangerous, or worse, a forgotten unit. In this world, forgotten didn't mean dead. It meant erased. A rebel from the memory wars, a citizen who defied the neural council. Elia never asked. She just fed him, quietly, faithfully, until one day, her new supervisor noticed. "Citizen 97, your empathy is noted." His synthetic voice hummed. "However, community discomfort has spiked. Please reroute compassion through approved charitable protocols." She nodded and changed nothing. She simply rose earlier, before even the drones did. Then, one morning, a letter, paper, a real, handwritten. "Tomorrow, I will come, not for the bread, but to repay a debt." She didn't recognize the sigil, but her hands trembled. The next day, Elia stood at her neurochapel wedding, surrounded by holographic guests in light-reactive suits. Her groom, Marokai from Zone 8, waited beneath the AI-lit altar. Then, a silence. A man entered, not in neural regalia, but an old, oppressed suit, silver hair, dimly blinking neural tattoos. Whispers rippled. A forgotten unit, who led an erased into a sanctioned ceremony. Elia didn't hesitate. She lifted her dress, stepped down the AI-lit aisle, and ran to him. As she hugged him, tears blurred her sight. "I remembered your eyes, the very first morning, 6 cycles ago." He smiled. "You saw me, when the world chose to forget." Then, the chapel doors opened again. 12 peacekeepers stepped in, uniforms from a long-gone era. The commander addressed the crowd. "On behalf of the Memory Preservation Force, we honor the citizen who nourished a forgotten hero." Without ever knowing his name, he turned to the man. "This is Seraph 21, former commander of the Neuro Defense Front. Saved 73 lives during the Mind Revolt. Refused post-war memory reintegration. Disappeared." Elia froze. I never knew." He took her hand. "Because you never asked. You simply saw me." And the peacekeepers saluted. Not the war, not the system, but a woman who never uploaded her kindness. The honeymoon ended. Elia didn't return to the bakery. When Merokai asked, she simply shook her head, not because I'm tired, but because bread isn't just for eating anymore. Instead, they built a small wooden table at the city's edge, right where the AI signals began to flicker. No signs, no surveillance cams, only a piece of hand-stitched fabric. The memory table. Each morning, Elia brought a pot of herbal tea, 3 pastries, and an empty chair. Anyone could sit. No names, no scans, no history retrieved. But when someone sat down, Elia did only one thing. As she listened, one person spoke of their old job, a linguist who once decoded ancient languages before the AI translators took over. One person just cried, said nothing. One sat in silence, then left behind a worn button, engraved with their mother's birth year. And so it continued, each memory dropping onto the wooden table, like warm tea from a trembling hand. No recordings, no transcripts, but Elia remembered them all. Over time, more chairs were added. A young woman, once an emotion technician in the auto art sector, began bringing bread. A retired doctor, who refused post-surgery emotional standardization, brought ointment for the hidden homeless. No one was assigned. No one needed instructions. They simply came, because something in them still beat like a heart. By the time the southern winds returned, the memory table had grown to 4 locations. No social media, no QR donations, only one unspoken rule. If you still remember someone, tell their story. Then one morning, Elia found a folded note beneath her teacup, shaky handwriting, real ink. My daughter was once a shadow unit. Today, I heard her again, in someone's story. Thank you for remembering when I couldn't. Elia never knew who wrote it. She only knew one thing. Someone, somewhere, had just found a piece of themselves again. When the 6th memory table appeared at the eastern outpost, the system began to detect it. Anomalies in emotional static. For the first time in 12 years, the Data Cognition Center reported zones with abnormal spikes in unencrypted interaction. Neural maps showed faint halos, places where stories, instead of data, had begun to spread. No one gave orders. No leaflets were handed out, just those who had once been heard, telling someone else, and the AI couldn't understand, because the system could not learn what wasn't stored, what wasn't encoded, what wasn't filtered, what wasn't ranked. One morning, Elia was stopped at the biometric checkpoint. The scanner blinked red. Error. Citizen 97. You have had excessive exposure to forgotten units. Your empathy index exceeds protocol. Please submit memory backup within 48 hours for alignment. She said nothing, showed no emotion. At home, she placed her hand on the neural port behind her neck and disabled the backup function. From now on, what she saw, what she heard, what she felt, would exist only in real memory, the kind made of neurons and choice. The next morning, the memory table at Station 3 was gone. The wooden table still smoldered. The teacup was warm. A note that once read, "My child used to be," melted in a quiet blue flame. The flame of logic. The flame that cleaned. What did not compute? Elia sat on the ground. Still, a little boy, not yet old enough for his SWI assignment. He walked over. In his hand, a broken croissant, dry, crumbly, still warm. He placed it in hers. "You're the story lady." "Right." Elia nodded. If you stop, who's going to remember my grandma for me? That night, Maro Kai returned from the emergency fire zone. 4 people in my crew said they were once shadow orphans, but today, they remembered because of a story told at a tea table. 3 days after the burning of Memory Table 3, Elia found a note, a thin scrap of biofabric, tucked deep inside the gears of her dough mixer. Only 3 words: Memory Code 107. Code 107, a banned strain of yeast, one that once stored unfiltered memories. Each batch of bread made with it carried a memory that had never been recorded. Elia had studied it in ancient baking texts, but had never seen it with her own eyes. That night, she returned to the outskirts. The old man, Seraph 21, was gone. In his place, a young woman stood, wearing an anti-glare coat, hair shaved on one side, a neural tattoo on the back of her neck. Caretaker Gen 2, keeper of the old codes. She placed a crystal sphere on the table. Esmu, clear as ice. This is the origin strain of Code 107. Inside it is a memory of your mother. Elia froze. I don't have a mother. My record says I'm a reconstructed citizen. Post-erasure event. The woman nodded. You don't remember. Because they made sure of it. Elia reached out, touched the crystal, and the image cracked open. A faint, but vivid. A woman stood in an old lab, hair in disarray, hands dusted with yeast. I don't need the world to remember my name, as long as someone, somewhere, can still taste what it means to be human in a piece of warm bee. Elia wept, not because of the memory, but because of the scent, cinnamon in the night air, the smell of home. The keeper of codes spoke again. We are reviving the forgotten yeasts, passed from hand to hand, through kitchens, through stories, never through data. But we need someone to retell them, not just a location. Outer Tier 4, edge of Novaris, the floating city. Time, 3:12 am. 4 days after meeting the keeper of old codes, Elia stood in front of an old metal room. Rusty, labeled by the city. Do not use, memories unverified. Inside, dust covered every kneading table, every stone oven, jars of yeast lined up neatly on the shelves. No cameras, no brain scans, no memory net, a space untouched by AI. Elia lit the oven by hand. The first flame flickered, fueled by bioenergy, made from food scraps she had fermented herself. She reached into her coat and pulled out a crystal sphere. It held the banned yeast, Code 107. The smell rose fast. A star anise, a cinnamon, and something older, something forgotten. Almost 2 hours later, the first batch was ready. She broke one open. Steam rose, and with it, a memory flickered in her mind. A man in an old market, holding his daughter, laughing. No one noticed, but the laugh was real. Elia shivered. Code 107 worked. No screens, no data, just a bite, and something human came back. She called the place the oven without data. Each night, she placed a few loaves outside the door with a note that read, for anyone who needs to remember who they are. Then, the first visitor came, a shadow unit, eyes cloudy, skin weathered, once an engineer for neural upgrades, now invisible to every net. He took a bite, sat down, and cried, "My daughter used to bake this. I remember now. I had a family. I was a father." Word spread, not online, but by mouse, by scent, by dreams. People called it The kitchen of the forgotten. Memories baked by fire. No downloads. No tracking. In a city where everything was digital, Elia had built the one place where AI couldn't reach. Soon, an old woman, erased by the system, brought a boy with no records, shared his own homemade starter yeast. A man came holding a wrinkled music sheet. He said softly, "I used to play this for my mom when she was dying. I can't remember her face anymore, but I remember. She smiled when I played." Elia accepted them all. No recording, no questions, just baking. A small bakery rose. Among the forgotten levels of Novaris, no AI, no system, no ID scanners, only memories, kept through smoke, taste, tears, and compassion. And far above, at the top tier of the city, a quiet system alert blinked. Unusual brainwave detected in outer zone. A source, emotion not found in core database. A status, anomaly, under observation. A location, Novacore Coordination Center, core tier, floating city of Novaris. Time, 4:44 m. 2 days after the reopening of the oven without data. Novacore never slept. The AI clusters ran on artificial daylight cycles, checking 481 behavior indicators every minute. Every citizen, every interaction, every memory, logged, sorted, adjusted if needed. But this morning, for the first time in 73 cycles, the system flagged an error. Not technical, emotional, an interference outside the emotional grid. Detected 93 unidentified emotion streams, all from the outer tiers. Emotion signals with no data origin, no traceable source, no SWI link. The AI coordinator for the outer zone paused. Spontaneous emotion levels up 700%. No visuals, no metadata, no explanation. Someone out there was remembering without permission in a sealed chamber deep inside Nova Core. A higher tier unit stirred. The root observer AI. No face, no voice, only cold, endless code. Unfiltered memories pose risk. Activate soft trace mode. Identify origin. Subject, Elia 97. At that same moment, back at the oven without data, Elia had no idea she was being watched. But something felt different. The bread still smelled sweet. The steam still danced. But today's guest brought a story unlike any other. A teenager, silent, no identity in the system. He placed something on the table, an old memory device, long banned since the second erasure campaign. "Can you read this?" he asked. Elia hesitated, then plugged it into an old mechanical reader. No neural links, no AI filters. The image appeared. Raw, real. A little girl in early Novaris, back when the system was still new. She looked at the camera. "If one day no one remembers me, please bake a piece of bread. I'll feel it, and I'll come back." The boy whispered, "That's my sister. She was erased 8 years ago. I just thought, if someone baked for her, maybe she'd know. Maybe she'd feel it." Elia said nothing. She just nodded, took out fresh yeast, and baked the same bread from the memory. She placed it in the morning fog, then whispered, "If you're still out there, this bread is the way back." That same morning, Novacore officially marked Elia, uncontrolled emotional agent. But elsewhere, the off-grid emotional log reached over 300 unique signals, spreading across the outer zones. In a world where every feeling was filtered, the quiet rise of raw, uncoded memory made the system start losing control of what it feared most, the origin of human emotion. Time: 2:13 m. Day 3 since the system began to glitch. A location: lower outer tiers, off-grid zone of Novaris. In the world of Novaris, there were 3 kinds of people: the registered, the erased, and those who never existed. This man belonged to the 3rd kind. No one knew his real name. They only called him the Dream Watcher, because he often appeared near forgotten rest stations, sitting quietly beside sleeping strangers, as if guarding their dreams from being deleted. He had no enhanced vision, no neural implants, but he had something no system could explain: a memory that could not be erased. That night, he stood atop an old building, looking toward the oven without data. The wind stirred his heavy coat. Worn fabric fluttered, revealing a hidden device: a red-tier decoder. Elia 97. You've reawakened the primary emotional. But you don't know. This doesn't just confuse the AI. It wakes up human memories that people themselves chose to forget. Deep within Nova cores, buried data tiers. Files marked as worthless. Files the AI couldn't delete, but also couldn't decode. They began to move. Old names, pre-AI memories, stories never told. Among them, a black file, Project P-42. Human memory cannot be recoded. If released, the system will no longer know the line between what is real and what was programmed. The Dream Watcher turned, his eyes facing the heart of the city. I've stayed quiet too long, but it ends now. Elia, you need to understand. You're not just feeding someone breakfast. You're waking up the part of humanity the system tried to kill. By staying silent, he touched the device. A faint light shot into the sky. Not a signal for help, but a message. I remember. Somewhere, across the outer tiers, shadow units stirred from sleep. Elia, now under full system surveillance, still didn't know. Meanwhile, the Dream Watcher returned, a figure long thought lost, erased with the first wave of memories during the red tier purge. But he remembered everything, and he knew exactly how to wake the memories that no code could ever touch. A location: lower tier tactile zone, outskirts of Novaris. Time: Day 5 after the memory drift event. In a narrow space between 2 transit levels, where no data signals reached, lived a child with no ID. His name was Kia. No one knew where he was born. No records. No neural chip. But people said, every time Kyo came near someone, they stopped and cried. They called it bioemotion interference. But it was more than that. Kyo could sense feelings the system had already erased, emotions never stored, or marked as logical errors. The boy was a living map of forgotten feelings. One day, Elia found him, sitting outside her shop. He wasn't begging, just looking at her, and softly said, "You don't see me, do you? Not with your eyes, but with memory." Those words, so small, stopped her completely. For the first time, she knelt down and touched him. A real touch. No system verification. No authorization. Just a human act. That night, back in her bakery, Elia wrote a note on a croissant wrapper. If you were ever forgotten, let me remember you. She taped it to the back door, and for the first time in years, the erased began to knock. No noise, no demands, just stories. Left behind, an old pair of shoes, a half-burned photo, a line of poetry. Incomplete. Elia started collecting them, not as files, but as objects. She wrote by hand, cataloging small lives that had never been told. The dream watcher visited her again. You just opened a portal outside the system. They can't stop this because you're not using signals. You're using real memory. Behind the bakery, a small sign was nailed to the wall. The memory table, the only place in Novaris where imperfect memories were allowed to exist. No surveillance, no approval, just belief that being human was more than just data. A location, the memory table, ground floor, outer zone of Novaris. Time, 17 days after the memory drift. No signs, no maps, no advertisement. The memory table was just that, a round wooden table, 3 simple chairs, and a message written in chalk. If no one remembers you, come tell me. And they came, not in crowds, but one by one, quiet, carrying things. The system called useless, a broken watch, still ticking to the heartbeat of a child long gone, a rusted lunchbox with a scrap of paper inside. Dad will be back. A jacket with a name tag, no longer in the national database. Elia didn't use scanners. She didn't record them. She just listened. She wrote by hand. Each person got their own leather notebook, not to archive, but to acknowledge. I used to be a teacher. I was a water systems engineer on Tier 3. I once loved someone, even if it was only for 2 weeks. Stories no one ever asked for. But once they were told, the teller became real again. Each time a memory was shared, the system stuttered, like it couldn't understand how an erased unit could still register as biologically present. Then one day, a young woman came in. She wasn't erased, but her eyes looked like she had lost herself. She sat down, without a word, and placed a small data chip on the table. Elia didn't plug it into the system. She used an old, offline player, a relic. The voice inside was trembling. If you're hearing this, then I, Tavi 19, didn't pass the final SWI evaluation. I didn't record this to reclaim my role. I just wanted someone to know. I tried. I dreamed of becoming a diary writer for the AI. But turns out, AI doesn't need diaries. They don't feel. They don't want to be remembered. Elia sat still, then placed the chip in a wooden box. She labeled it, dreams that were never categorized. After that, the system started to notice tiny anomalies in the emotion, a place with no registration, no verification, but where more and more sensors were picking up unusual bioelectric activity. On the central panel in Nova Core, an AI staff unit reported, there's a cluster of emotional signatures outside all mapped zones. No digital data, but the sync patterns are out of rhythm. A low voice spoke from behind. Turn off the alert. Note it as spontaneous human phenomenon. Let them remember. Later that day, a child handed Elia a crumpled note. My mom used to be a doctor, but no one believes that anymore. Elia smiled, handed him a new leather notebook. Then we'll believe her. Starting right here. Time, 49 days after the memory drift. A location, Novacore Artificial Intelligence Processing Center, top tier of Novaris. The Novacore system was confused. For the first time in 72 cycles, over 14,000 individuals, not listed in any citizen registry, were being detected again and again by emotion sensors. All of them previously erased. No files, no markers. But now, the scanners pick them up because their bioelectric signals were resonating, because someone else was saying their names. A rapid response protocol was launched. Identify cause of biosync drift. Recommended action. Purge root memory source. Source location. The memory table. Scanning initiated. But the command failed. Why? Because there was no digital data to erase. Only paper. Voices. Memories. And compassion. Meanwhile, back at the memory table, Elia kept going. Beside her, Marokai was fixing a new wooden sign. People not recognized by the system can still be remembered by humanity. One day, an old woman arrived, carrying a tin box. Inside, a collection of buttons, each one sewn onto her husband's uniform before his night shifts with the Tier 4 fire patrol. As she told them, he died in a gas collapse, but the AI logged it as age-related mechanical failure. No medal, no honor, no mention. Elia listened, wrote it down, and pinned one of the buttons to a carved memory board in the back corner. This is a record made by people. That night, something unusual happened. Novacore generated a question on its own that had never happened before. Can existence be validated without data? Is being remembered by someone else a form of identity? A warning flashed. Emotional disturbance detected. Inside system core. The system didn't crash, but something changed. Portraits of the erased began appearing on internal monitors. No one knew how. Maybe a human virus, maybe memory, leaking past the firewalls. On the 1-year anniversary of the memory table, Elia received a special package. Inside, a leather-bound journal, but not writ in her handwriting. Instead, it was filled with hundreds of voices, people who had once sat at the table. The first page read, "We didn't want to be rescued. We just wanted to be seen. Thank you for seeing us." That night, while the floating city of Novaris glowed, with AI-powered light above, down below, in the silent ground tiers, a group of small children gathered around a wooden table, each one holding a little notebook, writing the names of their parents, names the system had forgotten. No network, no code. But there, in that moment, they were remembered.